Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
You're off limits, soldier.
Excuse me, I had no idea.
Can't be. Luce. Lucy, you're staggered. I'm Susan. Sue Penner. I was in the same class as your sister. My father was a bank manager.
Sue. Well, what do you know?
This is fantastic.
Ah, you've grown.
I didn't miss one of your plays on the wireless.
You didn't?
You're awfully good, Luce.
That's sweet of you.
I mean it. I followed your career. All the girls did. I just wish I'd been able to get to the city to see you on the stage. What are you doing here? Were you wounded?
Close a few times.
What ward are you in?
X. Well, there's a lot of battle-fatigued patients there, you know.
Major Carstairs nearly put me there when I arrived, but I got changed to theatre.
At least I'm still alive.
Hello, my name is Richard and I've got Parkinson's disease. In March 2004, I had my first operation for deep brain stimulation. Since that time, I've had the operation done again. My health problems began with the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease in 1990. Naturally, my health problems for the past 20 years have continued to be associated with Parkinson's disease. Only now they are as much about the various treatments I've undergone as the disease itself. Learning to cope with the deep brain stimulation has been harder at times than dealing with Parkinson's. It has turned me around in my thinking about Western medicine, the nature of the alternatives, and the important positive role of suffering in all of our lives. Somehow I managed to make myself heard.
Myself heard.
And understood for the narration.
Narration.
In the first documentary to Bridget Midnight Trembles.
Trembles.
So we asked Helen Morse.
Helen Morse, that's me.
That's me.
To do the narration for me.
Narration for me.
And here I am.
Here you are.
In the beginning, I had a dream. A very bad dream. I am in a taxi with Meg, my mother, and Kate. We must get to a hospital by 6:30 a.m. It seems my deep brain stimulator is short-circuiting, and I must have a second operation quickly because I could be electrocuted. I have been given this information by one of the neurosurgeons who told me, quite simply, we made an error. This was followed up by a darker, more sinister statement. That he couldn't watch my documentary because he knew both sets of electrodes were in the wrong place. My first reaction was to sue these bastards, take them to the cleaners. 1, for depriving me of my voice, and 2, for turning me into a pokey addict.
You know, in the budget for this documentary. Okay, now.
A shopaholic and a sex maniac. To be totally fair, only the first point can be blamed on deep brain stimulation. Point 2 can be attributed to punding, a word used to describe particular side effects caused by some of the drugs that are available for Parkinson's people. In the dream, I wanted to sue all the doctors for everything, especially for losing my voice. That and about $100,000 that I'd lost because of my punding-induced gambling addiction. But right now, I was more concerned with saving my life. I had been asked by my neurologist to turn off my deep brain stimulator 2 days before the second operation. I had done this. The first day with it off, everything felt great. But now, the beginning of the third day, everything was much harder. For a start, I couldn't get out of the taxi. My feet seemed to have become oversized and were tied up in knots. I finally had to fall out. My dream threw up much chaos. I had no idea where I was meant to be going. Then a quiet old man somehow managed to catch my eye. He didn't speak, but I swear I heard his voice.
Come over here, son. I'll take you there.
This was no dream. This was hard, cold reality. It is 6:30 a.m. I have arrived by taxi at the Alfred Hospital with Meg and Kate. It seems the deep brain stimulation is not working as it should because the electrodes are in the wrong place. So I'm having a second operation. I have been given this information by several neurologists who told me, quite simply, we made an error. One neurologist in Sydney told me that he couldn't watch our documentary because he knew both sets of electrodes were put in the wrong place. I had been asked by my neurologist to turn off my deep brain stimulator 2 days before the second operation. I had done this. The first day with it off, everything felt great. But by now, the beginning of the third day, everything was much harder. Harder to walk.
Harder to talk.
Harder to think.
Harder to breathe.
I felt bad. This was no dream. And despite it all being a repeat of the first operation I'd had in March 2004, I was as scared as I'd ever been.
I don't even want to kill myself anymore. I don't know if I ever did. Another piece of indulgence to keep up the interest. I decided to go back to Australia. What better place to see out the end of the world?
It is October 6, 2006. I am sitting down to watch the first screening of The Bridge at Midnight Trembles. The documentary shows my preparations for the day when Dr. Peppard switches on the deep brain stimulator for the first time and delivers the line that could be the motto for this first documentary.
Do not be afraid.
So there it was, 4 simple words. Do not be afraid.
There once was a man called Richard. He had been a film actor since he was about 15. He thought he was pretty good until aged 40. He was told he had a disease called Parkinson's. That was nearly 20 years ago. Gradually, his condition deteriorated. Finally, in 2004, he had an operation called deep brain stimulation.
James Parkinson's was the first one to identify the symptoms in his essay on a shaking palsy back in 1817, identifying the symptoms of tremor, rigidity, slowness of movement, postural instability. That was a very accurate description of Parkinson's. In fact, it was Charcot some 60 years later who read the essay and named the condition Parkinson's disease in honour of James Parkinson.
Parkinson's disease was named after a doctor who in 1817 published an essay which was to become world famous. It was called An Essay on the Shaking Palsy, or Paralysis Agitan. As described on the internet, it was a neuropsychiatry classic. In the preface of the essay, Dr. James Parkinson explains why he is writing about this malady. The disease had escaped particular notice, and the task of ascertaining its nature and cause by anatomical investigation did not seem likely to be taken up by those who, from their abilities and opportunities, were most likely to accomplish it. In other words, the blokes who should have done it didn't do it. This pissed off Dr. Parkey, and it was probably the reason he wrote the essay in the first place. Another reason might be that whenever Dr. Parkey looked out of his window, hundreds of bent people, all shaking and drooling, would be filing past. He used a lot of these shambling misfits as examples in his essay. The subject of the case which was next noticed was casually met with in the street. It was a man, 62 years of age, the greater part of whose life had been spent as an attendant at a magistrate's office. He had suffered from the disease for about 8 or 10 years. All the extremities were considerably agitated, the speech was very much interrupted, and the body much bowed and shaken. He walked almost entirely on the forepart of his feet, and would have fallen every step if it had not been supported by his stick. He described the disease as having come on very gradually, and as being, by his own reckoning, the consequence of considerable irregularities in his mode of living, and particularly of indulgence in spirituous liquors. He was the inmate of a poorhouse of a distant parish, and upon being fully assured of the incurable nature of his complaint, declined making any attempts for relief.
He knew there was no cure. I just hoped the poor old bastard had his Medicare card.
Even though it is still quite difficult to speak at this stage, it is a lot better than it was. I can actually get the words form to form now, a lot easier than I could before. And so that makes it easier for people to hear me and understand me, and I also get it louder too, because it's getting very soft here for a while.
I think that was great for Richard, as he said in the documentary. It made him go through the operation with much more ease than he would have. Having the cameras there and thinking it was part of a film, I think helped him. He's weighing it up. I think he would go in and have it done again if it was going to be sure it was going to improve things, but there's no guarantee.
We conducted a survey of our membership last year. We have 1,400 members to find out what the major issues were to people living with Parkinson's in Victoria. The main issue was the issue of poor medication management while people are in hospitals, nursing homes or respite. Carers lose confidence in the respite care provided, so they won't use respite because when their partner was in respite, they came out worse than when they went in. We need to be mindful of is that people can disengage with community, losing the job and becoming housebound, and of course that can lead to depression, isolation, and it has a real negative impact. So what we're about is to improve the understanding and awareness of Parkinson's, as well as the services, improving people's lifestyle, giving them confidence to engage in community.
But they don't put rich people in here. They never go crazy. Only abos, immigrants, and poor people go crazy. My name's Richard, and this is Mark.
Bill.
What have they got you for, Bill?
Piss pot.
Ah, piss pot. Psychopathic personality with schizophrenic palpitations. Plus an abnormal amount of alcohol substituted for the self. I'm sorry, Bill. This is only an initial diagnosis. You're a juice freak.
What do you mean?
We're all freaks here. You're a juice freak. We're more freaks. He's a power freak.
In 2005, Narissa Mapes was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 28. She immediately set out to increase public awareness of the disease and to help raise much-needed funds for research. To this end, she founded POP, or Perspectives on Parkinson's, which she heads with the optimistic slogan, "A cure in my lifetime."
And tonight's all about me. Well, it's a little bit about my foundation, POP, Perspectives on Parkinson's, which is a little bit about Parkinson's disease. Well, when I first found out I had Parkinson's, my grandmother flashed into my mind, and she's has Parkinson's as well, and she's very ill. She's bedridden, she can't walk, can't feed herself, and she relies on other people to care for her. I guess I needed to come to terms with what it meant for me. And then, scared. I'm not sure about scared, but I was in shock for a while, I must say. So dating. As hot as it is to tell someone on the first date that you've got a degenerative neurological condition, my friends have been warning me against it. But in the world of Google, potential suitors often have already found out that I have Parkinson's. So one particular gentleman who had done his research, I asked him, he told me about it, and I asked him if it was a problem. He said, no, not at all. As long as you don't bore me with the details. If I think about the future, I think it's hopeful. It's certainly with a view to not having Parkinson's anymore. It's just over 2.5 years now since I was diagnosed, and I didn't shut the door. I went back to uni, went back to postgrad, got a promotion at work, started my foundation, POP, Perspectives on Parkinson's. It's pretty hard getting up there talking about your future and your health and your deteriorating health, and giving people real raw examples of what it's like to strangers. When I went to Parliament House in Canberra, I was when I went to present the findings of an Access Economics report on Parkinson's to politicians and media. But the night before I had dinner with various Parkinson's officials and a neurologist, and I was sitting next to him. I had him cornered and I asked him a lot of questions. It was like having a 2-hour neurologist appointment. I'm sure he was enjoying it, but at one stage I said to him, well, what would you do if you had Parkinson's? And he just was dumbfounded, and he said, I never thought about it that way. And I said, well, maybe it's time you start thinking that way. Like, if you personally had Parkinson's, what would you do?
The good Dr. Parkinson wrote his essay in 1817, but Parkinson's goes back, much further back in human history. In ancient India, Parkinson's disease was called Campavata. To treat it, they used a tropical legume called Mucuna pruriens. So 5,000 years before Christ, Dr. Campavata and the Indians were treating Parkinson's, or Campavata, with a legume which is a natural source of L-Dopa. Think about this. Nearly 7,000 years later, Dr. James Parkinson had to struggle to get the attention of a single able medico to even look at Parkinson's.
I see it definitely as complementary medicine rather than alternative medicine in everything that I do. I don't think there's only one form of medicine. We tend to, in this society, define Western medicine as medicine and everything else as an alternative, but I see them all as complementary.
Parkinson's disease is mentioned in the Bible. In Luke 13:11, it says, "On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, 'Woman, you are set free from your infirmity.' Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God." I wish Dr. Jesus was practicing today. Some would argue that he is. But then again, you'd never get in to see him. Modern doctors, who are mere mortals, have long waiting lists. So imagine the waiting list for someone who could perform miracles. There's something wonderful in Jesus' choice of words here. It's the authority he uses. "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." And when he says set free, he means you now have your freedom. And freedom is the only element a person with Parkinson's, or any disease for that matter, needs to discover and assimilate in order to recover.
Consideration. That's what it is. Consideration. Why should I have to clean up after you? So leave it. All you got to do is empty the ashtrays and put things away. Human beings got nothing on animals. At least animals leave their crap 60 yards from where they live. You leave your crap all over the table. Beings. What? Beings, not beans, human beings. Anyway, be more considerate. I've done the morning check. And I don't want to have anything to do with what you're getting up to in there. It doesn't interfere with you. You shouldn't do it. Listen, I know what I'm doing. Nevertheless, listen. There's nothing to worry about, okay?
Oh, are you? Fantastic.
In Newcastle, New South Wales, 2 daughters of the Mills family are afflicted with Parkinson's-like symptoms. Like me, the girls have had operations for deep brain stimulation. Unlike me, they have travelled to France, the only country at the time that was performing the operation on the very young.
Both Leanne and Beffy were normal babies, normal up to 3 basically, and 3.5. Leanna started to get a bit clumsy, and we just thought, oh, she's just one of those little kids that are a bit clumsy. We didn't really pay too much attention in the beginning, and then she started to lose weight and she started to have more and more falls. And it got to the stage where there was one day she actually fell into the wall and it cut her eye and left a little corner. And so we took her to the hospital, and
the doctors asked us what happened, and we tried to explain that she'd been falling all the time, but we weren't really quite sure the doctors believed us to one extent, because we couldn't really give them an answer why she was falling. So they sort of stitched it up, and that's when we sort of started thinking, okay, something's not right here, because she'd lost the weight as well. Then she developed fevers, and she developed from there bronchiolitis and pneumonia. Before we could understand what was going on, all her limbs had twisted and she couldn't walk. The doctors just thought they couldn't believe what they were seeing. They just thought, what's going on? And one of the doctors actually said to us, I've never seen this. In 25 years, I've never seen this. I don't know what's happening. Leanna came down really quite fast. She was the one that deteriorated first.
We've seen a doctor in Sydney, a very good specialist down there, and he was indicated he didn't think Becky was that bad, but when he seen her, he said, something had to be done, he had one chance. And he suggested an operation, so I just said, what, Melbourne, Adelaide, where we going? He said, France.
Because Leanna hasn't responded as well, they're trying to work out whether it'd be worth doing her surgery again, giving it another go. Basically, within a couple of weeks since she was in France, she was drinking out of a cup. She could never do that before. So when we got her home, everyone was quite surprised, because instead of the wheelchair, she was walking.
It is interesting to note that one dictionary meaning of recover is to regain composure or consciousness or control of one's limbs.
To be or not to be, that is the question. To have Parkinson's or not to have Parkinson's, that is another question. And so we come to Shakespeare.
I believe this exchange between Dick and Say from Part 2 of Henry VI spells Parkinson's disease.
Why dost thou quiver, man?
The palsy and not fear provokes me.
Again, there is something in here that perhaps even Shakespeare didn't intend. That fear may be one of the main causes of Parkinsonism. Once upon a time, there was a man called Richard, a disease called Parkinson's, and a second operation called deep brain stimulation.
The second operation was the result of the failure of the first. It took me a while to come to terms with the fact that after all the anguish of the first operation and the making of an award-winning documentary to record the process, the doctors had, in the words of my neurologist,
made an error.
You what? You made an error? You pack of dumb bastards! That's what I wanted to scream, and more besides. Instead, all I could manage was a very quiet, oh. But I did look for some second opinions. I went to Sydney to see my old friend, Dr. Ron Joffe. He sent me to a couple of Sydney's best and brightest, and they confirmed my worst fears. The electrodes were in the wrong place. One of these Mr. Doctors even admitted to me he had been unable to watch our documentary when it had been screened on SBS. I thought, how strange, a squeamish doctor. But then he went on.
I just knew the electrodes would be in the wrong place.
Was this intercity rivalry gone haywire? Professional jealousy? In the end, it didn't matter to me. We would do the operation again, with a different neurosurgeon. But what did the squeamish doctor mean, exactly?
What was his reaction?
Whose?
Hussein's. Who do you think?
What do you think his reaction was?
Captain Covey is demanding to see you, Lieutenant.
Tell him I'm not here.
Captain insists, Lieutenant.
I don't give a damn if he insists or not. Tell him I'm not here.
What should I say?
Tell him I'm dead for all I care.
Once upon a time, there was a man called Richard, a disease called Parkinson's, and a filthy infection called golden staph, and an operation called the emergency removal of the stimulator, also known as pulse generator. Why do they call it golden staph? There's nothing golden about it. Lead is more the element I would have thought of. Leaden staff, full of tiny little germs all trying to murder you. Once upon a time, there was a man called Richard, a disease called Parkinson's, and a final operation to put back the stimulator, also known as pulse generator, which I demanded be scrubbed with Solvol before it was returned to my scar-riddled chest. And anyone or everyone involved, could they please wash their hands?
Every year, according to the US Centers of Disease Control, 2 million Americans acquire an infection while they are in hospital. 90,000 die of that infection. The hardest part of the infection control team's job is getting clinicians to do the one thing that halts the spread of infection: to wash their hands.
These are American figures, but as always, Australia follows suit, only on a smaller scale. Still, I find this information astounding, that we have come this far in medical science, and yet the main problem is infection caused by unwashed hands. How can humanity be making any sort of progress anywhere if we can't even keep our hands clean?
I see the future as being a continuing struggle for those of us who develop Parkinson's and for those of us who dare to stand out against the power of Western medicine. In the long term, I see that the sorts of things that I do will become the medicine, mainstream medicine, because this society cannot not sustain the cost of Western medicine in its current form.
To do good genetic studies, you need to be able to study 3,000 people with the disorder and perhaps 3,000 controls. And if we can't even begin to do that until we've actually seen whether they've got some of the known genes. So that makes it very, very expensive research. Here at the Florey we've got quite an interest in Parkinson's disease, and there is a group of scientists working on stem cells, and their interests are trying to make the axons or the connections of newly grafted cells to make the right connections and hook up appropriately. We're also looking at ways of coaxing embryonic and fetal cells turning into the right sort of dopamine cells so that when they're put into the brain they survive and make only dopamine cells. And we think that this is important not because it's just about using them for embryonic or fetal stem cell research, but because whatever we find will be relevant to all cell-based therapies in Parkinson's disease.
The latest scientific research is interesting, but it only gives us information about how things work. Stem cell therapy is always going to fail if we insist on injecting stem cells into a degenerating environment. If we improve that environment, then we probably don't need cloned autologous stem cells, because we've got stem cells in our brain and our nervous system that we go on producing until the day we die. What we lack is the environment to create from them dopaminergic cells or serotonergic cells or anandaminergic cells. Gene therapy, again, is interesting, but genes change. We know that we can change our DNA moment by moment by changing the impact of the environment on the cell membrane.
It is my belief that we are a long, long way from finding a cure for Parkinson's. But I do believe that man is on an evolutionary path to a place where he will be much smarter than he is now. Along the way, we will take many wrong turns, but somehow we will get there. I believe this is our destiny, this enlightenment. It will be the time when everything wrong will be corrected and man's whole potential is realised.
Robert Johnson is a well-known Jungian analyst. In his book Transformation, he uses 3 characters from literature as metaphors for the 3 states of consciousness that represent the nature of humankind. According to Johnson, the 3 states are simple consciousness, complex consciousness, and enlightened consciousness. The first state, simple consciousness, is personified by Don Quixote. He was the fellow who mistook windmills for people. Very simple consciousness. There are not many of the old diggers left. The second state, complex consciousness, is where we're at. For this stage, Johnson says, our model is Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. With his indecision and depression, the prince really seems to be one of us. He knows too much to be stupid, but not enough to be wise.
Where is all this leading us? It's leading us to the highest level of consciousness, a level the Hamlet man can only catch a glimpse of, but never reach. He knows it's there, but that knowledge can't help him. The Don Quixote man never even dreams of it. Johnson uses Faust, as in Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, as the symbol for the highest level, the one who sees it all. I believe that until humanity evolves to this Faustian stage of enlightenment, there will be no cures for Parkinson's disease or any other diseases. Sure, we're getting closer, but at the present time, all we are really doing is treating the symptoms. We're nowhere near even knowing what the root causes are. If we are already enlightened, and quite a number of people, many alternative healers, New Agers and doctors among them, think they are, then perhaps these people can explain why Parkinson's disease in Australia alone is increasing by 25 people per day. I believe that, as far as Robert Johnson's consciousness scale goes, most of us are still well and truly Mr. and Mrs. Hamlet. We are all Hamlets.
We are the men and women of tragedy.
We are torn.
We are chaotic.
We are suffering.
We are divided.
We are sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought.
We are Hamlet.
The name action has deserted us.
We are divided.
We have no roots to the instinctive.
Our heads are not yet in the heavens.
We are empty and lonely.
We are not the new man.
We are not the healers.
We are not to gain any authority
from the enlightenment that is ahead.
We are all paralyzed.
We all have the shaking palsy.
We all have great fear.
Until our consciousness
can bring the vision
of life's meaning
into focus.
Until we move from 3
to 4.
If you take on the mind-matter, journey of healing that you're involved in, to a certain extent you've got to find out what are the conditions that you may have created. I don't just mean the Parkinson's disease, that are at the base of it all. Whatever decision you made consciously or unconsciously within your being, somewhere along the line that you were going to go off into a very dark place. When you said that in the first documentary about being secretly pleased that you had an escape clause, it's a pretty reasonable starting point if you were going to pursue any kind of inquiry along the lines that, yes, you may have created this disease and that, perhaps you can uncreate it.
It gets you away from yourself. You've got your mind on something else and you're not thinking, poor me.
That's right.
And that's why I like to keep fairly active. There are days, I have bad days, and you get down on yourself and think, why me? But I try not to. I try to keep myself occupied.
Is there anything you can't do?
Oh, well, I have a lot of trouble now trying to write. The way I'll go, the tremors come in and I just can't control the pen. So I've been trying to do it left-handed because my tremors are all in the one side. I had real trouble swallowing, and my doctor sent me to the ear, nose and throat doctor. As soon as I walked in and started talking to him, he said to me, "You're at the wrong place." He said, "You should be as a neurologist." He said, "You've got Parkinson's." And he twigged it, the ear, nose and throat doctor. And sent me, and they'd done all the tests on me then, and sure enough I had it. Straight away I accepted it, I've got it, but it's not going to stop me.
So you take
every 3 hours.
Stalevo?
Half a Medipar at 7 in the morning, 10, 1, 4 and 7. When the medication is wearing off is when I get a sort of panic attacks.
Parkinson's was stopping it. Having a nightmare. I hate it. I'd rather have all the disease in the world and stop.
It's recognised more and more that it's to do as much with non-motor symptoms, so the sort of pain that you get and the anxiety, and the depression and things. So whether that wearing off actually affects your mind directly, or whether it's a sort of reaction to your body getting sort of, you know, bound up and tight.
When I was a kid, my sister told me that if I held my breath, mosquitoes couldn't get away. So I used to go down into the garden and I'd wait for one to bite me. I'd hold my breath. I really thought I was playing a trick on them. It took me weeks before I figured out it was the other way around.
It's hard for me to imagine you as a kid.
Most people say the reverse. What about you? Did you always want to be an architect?
Oh, I wanted to be just about everything at one time or another. Painter, photographer, botanist. Now I'm an architect.
Do you like it?
I love it. You start off thinking, I'm going to create something beautiful. You quickly realise it's hard enough to find someone with the same vision, but 1,000 times harder to find someone with that vision and the money. You keep trying.
A true believer. We've got a lot in common. We both think we can change the world.
I was a schoolgirl, 25 years now, and I had seen the movie Heatwave, and I remember being a little mesmerised by Richard. At the time I decided that I would use my tenacity, and I wrote to TV Week and I asked them if there was any way that they could put me in contact with Richard, and they kindly supplied me with his agent's address. We met up in the city. I remember we had a little lunch. And then we went on to the movies. As soon as we came out, Richard said, "Do you want to see another movie?" We ended up having a beautiful friendship. We lost a little bit of contact. I do know that Richard went on and got married and had 2 beautiful girls. 10 or 12 years ago, he rang me. I was living in Queensland at the time, to tell me that he had an illness. And then about 2 years ago, I saw the publicity for Richard's documentary on Parkinson's that he'd made, and I felt the need to speak to him, to contact him and see how he was going in his life.
It doesn't matter what we do with stem cells or genes or how many new drugs flood the market. It doesn't matter how often we meditate or eat limp lettuce leaves, or sip chamomile tea, or swallow pills, or set up websites, or have deep brain stimulation. I simply believe that we are not going to affect Parkinson's disease in the slightest, because we are simply playing in the shallows. The Indians beat us by 7,000 years to the last real breakthrough, which was to market L-Dopa. So how do we take the plunge that is required to speed up the process of evolving enlightenment, so that we can heal ourselves?
I warned Richard. I didn't know how things would pan out with me being perhaps like a wild animal that's suddenly been caged. Well, he was wild himself, so I think he fully understands that, and he's probably a little envious that he has to limit his wildness now. But I just know that I have a lot of joy and happiness in my life now, which I may not have ever had if I hadn't met up again with Richard. So I consider myself very lucky as well.
I'm learning to juggle. Juggling is something I should have learnt years ago. It's a very suitable activity for actors and people with Parkinson's disease. It can be a meditation and it expands the mind and increases brain power. And it's a metaphor, that's most importantly, it's a metaphor. This, I believe, is the secret to life, being able to believe two opposing ideas, opinions or viewpoints simultaneously. I'm someone who's taken full advantage of Western medicine. God knows where I'd be if I hadn't had deep brain stimulation or hadn't accepted help from countless doctors and nurses whose dedication and professionalism have kept me going for nearly 20 years. This is one view I must keep up there. But there is another point of view, a second ball in the air, and that is the alternative or complementary view of medicine. I have learned two things since 1990. I've learned to keep an open mind, and I've learned that Western medicine tends to lock you up, which in the end gives you nowhere to go. So I'm learning to balance Western medicine and the contemporary medicine, keeping them both in the air at the same time, thereby learning from them both. We must balance the West and the East, ego and soul, good and bad, light and dark, and finally the to be or not to be. Because you know it boils down to Hamlet's single solitary statement, to be or not to be. I want to live and I want to live well, and to live well means taking the journey away from Hamlet's question, away from depression and indecision to enlightenment.
And you prayed and talked about God.
I wouldn't get angry about that, Walter. I knew half those men, and a lot more above the trenches. If they ever come to terms, let us bury them.
They must. The stench is unbearable. You used to preach that God was on our side. But there's dead Turks up there. Are we all good and they all evil?
War links us all, even our enemies.
You've changed your tune, Reverend.
I dare say. But we've all changed. Haven't you?
Oh, yes. I didn't pray when we threw the lime on Frank. I was too busy feeling thankful it was him, not me.
Every night on the various television news services, there is always at least one story about a new drug or a new surgical procedure or a new device or a new area of study or a new toy or a new something to make us feel better. It might represent new inroads into the treatment of cancer or of diabetes, or even every now and again a new promise for Parkinson's people. And that is how it is usually phrased, except the word people is changed to sufferers. We'll be back in a moment with a look at a new surgical instrument that promises relief for Parkinson's sufferers. Our society is geared to the idea that any suffering is rotten, that it is of no use to anyone and that it should be stamped out. We are constantly teased by promises of relief. Similar headlines bombard us everywhere. Consider this cover from Time magazine, a special edition dated January 15th, 2001. Drugs of the future. Amazing new medicines will be based on DNA. Find out how they will change your life. Everything is about changing your life. But from what into what? Here's another one. Newsweek, dated December the 2nd, 2002. The Science of Alternative Medicine. If you can't beat them, join them. Since when did alternative medicine become scientific? No matter where it is placed, the information we are fed tells us that suffering is bad and that we should do anything to avoid it. Throwing away this idea and knowing that disease and pain and suffering are vital to our awareness and knowledge of life's mysteries and what it means to be human. Taking this step is taking a step away from the Hamlet family and taking a step towards enlightenment. Somehow we must convert our tank full of suffering into knowledge. The world of consumerism and saturation advertising denies suffering. This denial urges us to take cover from our enemy, supposedly suffering. We then worry ourselves sick until we lose sight of the truth completely. We end up looking blankly into a mirror, and not only do we fail to recognize how important suffering is to the art of living, we fail to even recognize ourselves. It doesn't matter how many diseases we find cures for. Constant fear and worry will destroy us. It is only when we can change this fear and worry into a desire for understanding and knowledge that we can begin to appreciate how and why we must wake up. In the process, we can discover compassion, which gives us a real purpose in life. And from this, we discover our own creativity. What else do we need more than that?
If you are Ross Collins, you probably need a hell of a lot more. Ross made a documentary on his Parkinson's disease a few years ago called Shake, Rattle and Roll. In it, he detailed his trip to South America, where he underwent some extreme form of alternative treatment. I thought he was mad then, and I still think he was mad then. But when I saw him on State Line the other night, I was deeply shocked at his deterioration and sad. So Collins has decided to try deep brain stimulation. There is only so much suffering a man can take. Look what happened to Hamlet.
Good night and thank you.